Good evening and blessings to you all. Today is Tuesday, so means a Q&A session. We're in the middle of winter, just had the shortest day of the year, so I hope you're all keeping warm. Today myself and the monks, we went out for Bindabata in Nariwaran, and then went walking on the coast, a walking path called the George Bass Coastal Walk. So it was quite cool because of winter, but walking warms you up, but when you stop walking you get cold again. So it's the same with whatever we're doing, whether we're working or doing things. When you're moving around you stay warm, but as you sit down you get cool again, so you have to wear enough clothes, get the heating on if you have it. Otherwise very easy to catch a cold. Common cold still exists, even though COVID always wins when it's time for the news. Nobody mentions the common cold anymore, but it's still around. So we have a few questions. How to deal with rude people? There seems to be more of these around these days. Well, I'm not sure who's counting. Is someone counting, doing the statistics on this? I don't know. I'm not sure that it's anything new, because we know that in the time of the Buddha, people were rude and argumentative or aggressive in those days. So there are still such people around today. If it is true that there's more of them around, perhaps it's because of the current pandemic, which seems to put pressure on people, workplace conditions, moving, chopping and changing, working in office, working at home. The kids have to study at home, study at school, come back to home when there's lockdown. Maybe there's more pressure on our work, more targets. People are saying when you work at home, then the boss gives you more work to do. Perhaps there are different things, different factors in this. Maybe all being cooped up in the same house during lockdown makes people more irritable, frustrated. Not being able to go on holiday or travel, not being able to do some of the things you would like to do because of lockdown could be a cause of irritation. So it is possible people display that more these days. They're short-tempered, impatient, snap at each other, take it out on each other by saying a few bitter words perhaps. So how do we deal with this? Well, the Buddha encouraged, number one, be patient with yourself, be patient with others. If people are rude to you, show their temper to you, try to be patient with whatever feelings are triggered in you. The feeling of tension, the negative thoughts that may come up as a reaction to other people's words or behavior. Try to be patient with that, try to establish mindfulness so that you can consider what is the right response in that situation. So if you're patient, you're mindful, your wisdom can work better, and maybe sometimes the best answer is just to do nothing, say nothing and do nothing, because it's, as the Buddha pointed out, if someone else's words are rude, insulting, aggressive, that's their karma, their action, their verbal action, not yours. You may have to witness it, be on the receiving end of it, of course. It's not easy, but really it's their karma coming from their state, unwholesome state of mind, their suffering, and they will receive the results of that. One of them may be that you are less inclined to be helpful or cooperative with them because they're being rude or insulting. but also their own state of mind will not be peaceful, and maybe gets worse the more they go on in that way, displaying that kind of behavior. So the Buddha made that clear. You have to reflect, this is not my suffering, this is not my karma, this is that person's karma. It's their words, their mood. So try not to take ownership of their words or their behavior. Even if it's unpleasant, try not to attach to it. So maintain your mindfulness and your ability to reflect in that situation the best you can. As we know, there's the story of the Brahmin who came to annoy the Buddha, to test him out, to see if he was really wise and peaceful. And he scolded him and insulted him and tried to poke fun at him and pull apart his teachings. And he was unable to move the Buddha. The Buddha was immovable, patient, calm, didn't react with anger to this man who was consciously trying to annoy him, and won the man over, because he realized the Buddha really does know his stuff. The Buddha is mindful, wise, peaceful, compassionate, and that impressed him, so it won him over. And so he asked the Buddha, how can you do this? How come you're so well disciplined, well trained, that you're not moved by my criticisms and insults? And the Buddha said, well, it's just like food and drink that you have at your home. When you have a visitor come to your home, you give them food and drink, don't you? And he said, yes, I'm a good Brahmin. I give them food and drink. But if your visitor doesn't want or accept that food and drink, who does the food and drink belong to? And the Brahmin thought and said, well, it still belongs to me because it's my home, my stuff. And the Buddha said, well, in the same way, I don't accept your words, your insults, so who do they belong to? And you can imagine the Brahmin kind of shyly, meekly smiling and kind of shrinking away because he realized, yeah, they still belong to me. It's my own karma. It's not the Buddha's karma, it's my karma that I'm making here, my unwholesome karma. So if you think about it, the people who are being rude, aggressive, assertive, over-assertive maybe, in different situations, if you can establish mindfulness and reflect on it, they're really worthy of compassion rather than anger, rather than looking down on them angrily, being annoyed by them. Really we have to look at them with compassion because they're creating the causes for further suffering for themselves. So it's sad, it's not a good thing, of course. It's not an easy thing to encounter people who are like this, but they're suffering, displaying their suffering to you. So if you can, to reflect on compassion and wish for them to realize that their actions are not skillful, they're not helping them, not helping the world as a whole. And see that they're really worthy of compassion. And the same for us as well, isn't it? Sometimes we lose our tempers and say something we shouldn't, or we're over-assertive or aggressive or rude. Well, that's our responsibility to manage that, restrain that, bring up mindfulness and give up that kind of behavior. So if you see it in someone else and you start judging them, oh, they're so rude, maybe turn it around and ask yourself, do I still do that? Can I still do that in my behavior, my speech? And again, that will bring up more awareness and probably more understanding of the other person, because you realize, if I can still do that, well, I understand that they can still do it. We're still human beings with our own delusions and attachments. And even though it's an unpleasant situation, you have more sympathy, more understanding for them because you know you also sometimes do that. Another question. What is the difference between the taintless liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom? So from rude people to taintless liberation of mind is quite a big step. Taintless liberation of mind. Well, taintless means without asawas, without kilesas, without mental defilements, the causes of suffering have been abandoned. So it's nibbana, liberation of mind. I think that's referring to that phrase, ceto vimutti. Vimutti means liberation, emancipation, freedom from the causes of suffering, the asawas, from avijja, ignorance. So the mind is liberated on attaining nibbana, abandoning greed, anger, delusion. That's what our practice is all about, recognizing them as the causes of suffering and then abandoning them through developing the path, sila, samadhi, panya. Liberation by wisdom, well, anyone who's liberated also needs wisdom. The development of right view, seeing all phenomena as ultimately impermanent, unsatisfactory and selfless. So when one sees these three universal characteristics in physical, mental phenomena, one gets tired of grasping at them, tired of cultivating kilesa. One wants to abandon kilesa because it just leads to suffering. You see that. So wisdom ultimately is the wisdom that sees the three characteristics in our experience, physical, mental phenomena, abandons greed, anger, delusion, and brings one to the experience of nibbana, the end of suffering. I think, this is for the scholars, those who like to read the sutras and commentaries. Sometimes liberation of mind is also applied to the four Brahmaviharas, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. And that would be still as part of the path leading to nibbana. But really, nibbana, you could say liberation of mind is part of the path in that way, and liberation by wisdom is the result. When you cultivate the mind to its potential, develop samadhi fully as part of the Eightfold Noble Path, then this is a basis for wisdom to arise, and wisdom is ultimately what sees clearly the way things are. Clear knowledge and vision of the way things are leads to liberation. So sometimes they say liberation of mind is referring to the path, developing sila, samadhi, panya, and wisdom is almost like the fruit, the result of that. Another way people talk about this is that there are those people who are naturally inclined to develop samadhi and go on to develop jhana, rupa jhana and arupa jhana, maybe all the 8 jhanas, because they've been doing it maybe for many lifetimes and have that parami, that skill. So they still need wisdom to free their mind, to contemplate and free the mind from the taints and from kilesas, but samadhi is well developed. If they've developed the 4 arupa jhanas, they'll also develop the abhinya, 6 abhinya, and they have psychic powers, the ability to read minds and maybe know people's karma and see beings in other realms and so on. So they may have more psychic power, psychic ability, whereas somebody who is liberated by wisdom, they sometimes say it like this, that they maybe only have enough samadhi to develop insight to see the true nature of phenomena. So they have less samadhi, maybe less psychic powers, minimal psychic powers. Maybe they don't master the 8 jhanas. They may master the 4 rupa jhanas, but may not master the arupa jhanas, even though they probably could if they went on and had the time to practice, but maybe they develop and devote themselves to the development of the wisdom, the insight to cut off the defilements as a priority. Because training the mind in samadhi, particularly the arupa jhanas, takes a lot of time, a lot of quiet, meditative time in seclusion. And it has to be a certain character. Not everybody is suited to that. Some people are more suited to contemplation, analysis, developing wisdom and insight. So, as you see on the shrine behind me, normally you can see these two standing statues of Sariputta and Moggallana. And Sariputta is considered to be the Buddha's disciple who was foremost in wisdom, and he loved to analyze and contemplate the Dhamma and explain it very well. Moggallana was foremost in the development of samadhi, psychic powers, and amazing ability of mind to use samadhi to teach, to know things, special knowledges, and so on. So they kind of represent this liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom, the two aspects of the practice. But anyone who's liberated will have liberated their mind and have developed wisdom, so don't be confused by that. They're both qualities of anyone who's attained Nibbana. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of the Fours, chapter under the title The Sun, it was mentioned an ascetic can be liberated as a white lotus or a red lotus. Having read, the only difference between these two are the former does not dwell having contact with the body, the 8 emancipations, and the latter dwells with the body, the 8 emancipations. Can Lumpur please elaborate further on this? Well, again, I'm not a scholar. I haven't read all the texts, or can't remember all the texts. Generally, they often in the sutras or the commentaries refer to an arahant as a lotus. Right? The lotus, blooming lotus, symbolizes an enlightened mind. So in Thailand, like in Australia, we do have a lotus farm down the road, so very occasionally people offer lotuses. Not often, because they're quite rare in this cold climate, but we do have them nearby. So people offer a lotus, usually they offer it and it's closed. And you put it in a vase on a shrine maybe, and then eventually it starts to open. So sometimes monks joke, when the lotus opens, they say, oh, somebody must have been enlightened today because the lotus has opened. So it's a kind of a monk joke, not just a joke, but also a hope. It's a sign of hope. Oh, maybe somebody's been enlightened somewhere in the world today. Ideally in this monastery, but you never know. So white lotus, red lotus, well, perhaps it's and this other phrase about contact with the body and dwells with the body and does not dwell with the body, I think it may refer to the fact that there are those beings who develop the 8 emancipations, or the 8 jhanas again, 4 rupa jhanas and the 4 arupa jhanas. And anagamis may develop deep states of jhana, that skill. They're non-returners. So maybe someone attains to the level of anagami in their practice, so they've abandoned their attachment to the body, no more greed, no more anger, but they still have the subtle kilesas, attachment to the pleasures of jhana, to the subtle sense of self, mana, and avijja, ignorance. So there's still very subtle mental defilements left for the anagami, but they die, but they're called non-returner because they don't get reborn as a human. They're born in the Sudawasa realms, the pure abodes, as a Brahma because they've attained jhana, and from there they attain Nibbana. So in those abodes they're no longer connected to their body because they're in a very refined Brahma realm. Whereas there are those practitioners who are still in this realm as a human being connected to their body, and they may still attain the 8 jhanas. So very occasionally, in the old days, meet a monk in Thailand who was reputed to have attained the 8 jhanas. I remember the first time I met Lumpur Supar, who you may be aware he lived to about the age of 117 and died a couple of years ago. And I met him many, many times over the years, had great respect for him as a practitioner. And the very first time I met him, which was about 1987, 88, so a long time ago, he gave myself and the other monks who went to see him, he lived in Phuket at that time, gave us a talk about the 8 emancipations, the 8 jhanas, the 4 rupa jhanas and the 4 arupa jhanas. And his talk was so convincing, we all felt, yeah, he really knows what he's talking about. He's not talking from the books, he's really practiced this. And over the years, he did actually display psychic powers sometimes in different situations. He'd know what people were thinking, he'd know what's going on in other parts of the country. When we invited him to this monastery, he even said, well, I've already been and had a look at it, but my physical body won't make it, I'm too old and weak. But I've sent my mind and had a look at it already. So if you get 8 jhanas or abhinya, then that's the sort of thing you can do. So there are these people who have developed the 8 jhanas, but they're not very common. So I think for most of us, you listening, just keep working on your basic mindfulness practice and developing your samadhi, and whether you're going to become a red lotus or a white lotus, it doesn't matter so much. The important thing is just keep practicing and don't give up. So next question. There is equanimity regarding the base of infinite space. Wow, every question is about Rupa jhanas and Arupa jhanas today. Okay. There is equanimity regarding the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of nothingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Can Ajahn be so kind to explain a bit about these aspects? Well, I have to be honest, I'm not an expert in the Arupa jhanas. I have heard teachers like Lumpur Supa and others talk about them. So, well, they're pretty much descriptive, aren't they, in the way we describe them, the base of infinite space. So, it's the perception of infinite space. All the 4 arupa jhanas, formless jhanas, are based on the 4th rupa jhana. The jhanas based on, they're called the refined form jhanas, rupa jhanas. So you reach 4th jhana in your practice, then you, as it were, withdraw from that, contemplating infinite space, infinite space in the universe. Because your mind is so refined, you can do that, the perception of infinite space, and then you withdraw from that and contemplate the perception of infinite consciousness, that which knows the infinite space, which has got to be a more refined state. And then the base of nothingness, and you withdraw from contemplating the perception of infinite consciousness, and then it's just nothingness. And then withdraw from that, contemplate the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So, am I perceiving or not? It's the most subtlest kind of perception the mind can hold, most subtlest kind of samadhi object the mind can hold. The one other thing even more refined than that is Nirodha Samapatti, which is only attainable by anagamis and arahants. It's the deepest experience of samadhi, where it's the experience of cessation, so kind of everything goes quiet, and you can sit in that for 15 days. But we have a rule that even if you can attain Nirodha Samapatti and everything goes quiet, and you can sit there for 15 days, you have to come out for the monk's patimokkha. The Buddha made that rule because some monks, they have attain very deep states of samadhi, and they can just sit there for days and days and days. But they still have a rule, they have to come out and listen to the patimokkha for the good of the sangha. So it's an interesting fact that the Buddha saw that ultimately even if someone is very skilled in samadhi, they still have to attend the bhikkhu patimokkha. When Luang Por Tui was here many, many years ago, he talked about one senior teacher, Luang Por Bua, not Luang Por Mahabua, Luang Por Bua, who they say could attain Nirodha Samapatti, deep state of cessation. And then when he was dying, when he was a very old monk and dying, very weak, in the hospital, Luang Por Tui was helping to nurse him. He was a much younger monk, and Luang Por Bua was really struggling with terrible, painful feelings, dukkha vedana, because of his illness. And so Luang Por Tui said, why don't you just enter Nirodha Samapatti in the way you do when you're kind of new to these things, I guess. And Luang Por Bua said, when you're ill, sometimes you can't do everything you want to do. And there was just, the mind and body were just so weak, it wasn't the right time to enter such a deep state of samadhi. Oh, there's a further question. I thought the infinite space, infinite consciousness and nothingness are the aspects from practicing the other three Brahma Viharas. No, well, they're meditative states in their own right, the arupa jhanas. They're all based on, first of all, attaining the fourth rupa jhana, and then gradually withdrawing from that. So they're not quite the same as the Brahma Viharas, although somebody who attains these 8 jhanas almost certainly will have deep equanimity and also the other Brahma Viharas. The question, what is the difference between Kilasa and Asawa? The simple answer is not really any difference at all. Kilasa is a very general term for mental defilement, mental afflictions, which are considered to be the cause of suffering. Say in the model of the Four Noble Truths, there is suffering, there is its cause. Kilasa are the cause. But Kilasa is this broad term, so it includes danha, avijja, which is ignorance, danha, which is craving, different kinds of craving, upadana, different kinds of clinging. Asawa is just one of the words the Buddha used for describing kilesas. So they're the same things. He'd use different words, sometimes use oka, which means the floods, or the asawa. So an arahant is called kinasawa, somebody who's abandoned the asawa. There's 3 main asawas, that's ignorance, avijja, which is also kilesa. There's kama-asawa, which is the attachment to sensuality, so that's similar to kama-danha. So there's a lot of overlapping of concepts in Buddhism, just using different names to describe often very similar things. There may be slight, subtle differences in definition, but really describing the same kind of qualities of mind, these negative qualities that we pick up and condition the mind and cause suffering. So there's avijja-asawa, kama-asawa, and bhava-asawa. So it's the kilesa of becoming, the asawa of becoming. The actual word asawa can also be translated in a few different ways. Sometimes it's translated as the effluence or the outflows, a bit like pollution or sewage, because they're bad and they cause suffering, and they come out and they cause the mind to go out all the time looking to attach to the world and get entangled in the world. Sometimes they're called the taints. There's a few slight variations in the way people translate the word, but they're pretty much the same as kilesa. Bhava, so becoming, is like the desire, the craving for existence itself, for life, and also the kind of life, what the person is aspiring to through their actions and their activity and what they're attaching to, what they become. So that will also determine, whether somebody is reborn in a hell realm, animal realm, ghost realm, human realm, heaven realm, Brahma realm. Because as long as there's becoming, there's the cause for birth. And so only the arahant who's given up the asawas, abandoned them, will have no more becoming, no more birth. So it's a shorthand. The asava is a shorthand for many, many other, you might say, minor kilesas, minor defilements. Another sutta, you can read the Upakilesa Sutta, which goes through a whole list of 16 upakilesas, different kilesas, description of different negative states of mind, negative emotions, which afflict the ordinary unenlightened person, which have to be seen and abandoned. So they're very much talking about the same things. And I would maybe just read a few suttas to see how these words are used. Another question, can Ajahn talk a bit about atamayata? Atamayata is this word that Lumpur Buddhadasa made very well known in his very later years before he died. It's not such a commonly used word in the suttas. It only appears once or twice, I think. So it's quite an unusual word. And certainly in the old days, people never really mentioned it. But Ajahn Buddhadasa was one who liked to study the suttas as well as meditate. He was considered to be a very enlightened teacher. But he loved to take the Pali and bring out certain words which he felt were very important in describing the truth of the mind, the enlightened mind, or the path leading to the enlightened mind. And he'd often fix on certain words as being very descriptive, very pointing to certain important aspects of the practice. So he actually had a sort of a list of these words. Atamayata was at the end. It means unconcoctability. You might say non-proliferation. Like recently people have been asking about papancha, which we translate as proliferation, mental proliferation, based on craving, conceit, and attachment to views. So what keeps causing us to mentally proliferate, which we notice when we're meditating, you're trying to establish mindfulness and you keep thinking and thinking and thinking. It's caused by craving, conceit, views. So atamayata is the opposite. No more proliferation. The mind is completely unconcoctable. It can't be changed, altered, shaken, moved. All that thinking has stopped. So it's synonymous with nibbana, really. It's the highest state of mind. And he had a few phrases he'd use, like, you can't mess with me anymore. So the slang phrases to describe atamayata, meaning, you see something beautiful, but you can't mess with me anymore, meaning you won't get me moved by that beauty and attached to it and caught up in it and thinking all about it. Or something very unpleasant happens to you, painful, disappointing. That also cannot move me because in my mind is unconcoctable. So don't mess with me anymore. I have nothing further to do with you. That was his sort of slang phrase. He even once, I'm not sure it works completely, but I remember he's giving a talk about atamayata, and he said, he was quoting from the film Gone with the Wind, and he's saying this phrase, frankly, I don't give a damn, as a way of describing atamayata. So he was trying to produce some more down-to-earth descriptions of the mind that no longer can be concocted by events, by phenomena, no more craving, attachment, no movement. It's still, it's completely beyond all of that. But he also used these other words. He had this list. So it's like it started with anicca, the impermanence or the changeability of phenomena. Dukkha, so the unsatisfactoriness of phenomena. Dhamma-tittha, the naturalness of phenomena. Dhamma-niyamata, the natural law of things. Then ittapachayata. Ittapachayata is means dependent origination, which, as you may be aware, is the sort of central core teaching the Buddha gave on how suffering arises from ignorance through craving, attachment, becoming, birth, suffering. So ittapachayata means the conditionality of experience, the interdependentness of experience, how one thing arises dependent on another. So with feeling as a cause, craving. With craving as a cause, attachment. With attachment as a cause, becoming. Then there was sunyata, emptiness. So all phenomena ultimately are empty of self. Empty, sunyata. Tathata, suchness. I use that one quite a lot. It's tathata, it's suchness. It's the suchness of phenomena, physical, mental phenomena. They're just that much, suchness. There's nothing you need to add on to them, you don't need to attach to them, you don't need to take possession of them. All phenomena in this world, physical, mental, are not to be grasped at or attached to or identified with. It's just suchness, they're just that much, it's just what they are. And then atamayata, the unconcoctability, don't mess with me anymore. You cannot mess with me anymore. You cannot produce suffering in my mind anymore. That's nibbana, isn't it? You know? Whatever happens, the mind is not going to suffer. You know? As we were talking earlier today, some arahants reach a point where they're dying, and they're just from an illness, an injury, being attacked, whatever, attacked by an animal, attacked by a person, but their mind is unmoved. There's no sorrow, there's no anger, there's no loss, sense of loss. The mind is just perfectly still, and if the causes are there, then they die. And they don't fight it like an ordinary person would. They don't run away from it, scream and shout. They just know, the cause is here, I'm dying. And the mind is totally still because it's unconcoctable, atamayata. So there's a few insights into some very deep and profound words and concepts you brought up tonight. So there's certainly a lot more you could read or talk about these different things that you brought into the questions tonight, but nevertheless, we've given you some pointers. You have to go away and contemplate more and practice some more, and then maybe experience some of this for yourself. So maybe I'll leave it there tonight.